What is going on, Scan Fam? Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Current. We have been joined here by Arthur Sabinstev. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here. Quite excited.
Sure thing. Now, Arthur is the COO at Pocket Network. They're doing some very cool Web3 infrastructure things. So let's get right into this episode. Excited to hear some things that are going on at the Pocket Network and hear your takes on some things.
All right, yeah. So first, again, thanks for having me. I met Dennis at ETH Denver at our booth. Did a couple interviews live. Been texting back and forth for a week or two now, so it's been fun. I'm glad this was able to work out. So as you said, I'm the COO at Pocket Network. I've been there for about a year and change. It's called 15, 16 months at this point. And I guess you guys want to know what Pocket is, right? So Pocket is basically a decentralized infrastructure play. The example I use, but it's not my favorite, but it's also the one that gets the point across, is decentralized Infura. So Infura provides blockchain access in a centralized manner for 8 or 9 chains. All of them are EVMs. Pocket Network, as of this coming Monday, which is when this podcast should air, will provide access to 47 chains, not just EVMs, but other L1s as well. We do it in a decentralized manner. So we have a centralized gateway that will become a decentralized gateway in about a year or so. If not sooner. And we have a decentralized network of node operators or node runners or infrastructure providers, whatever term you want to use, that operate tens of thousands of nodes in 30 different countries. And they're operated by individuals who can operate as little as one node to behemoths who operate hundreds of nodes, if not 1,000 or so. I can't really tell you how many node operators we have, but it's probably in the order of 3 to 4 figures at this point.
That's awesome. Yeah. And just to bring some of our audience a little bit back on your experience and your background, when and how did you get involved with blockchain and crypto, and what path took you here essentially?
Well, it's a fun story. So in 2015, so my background, I went to school for medicine in 2004. I graduated with a degree in biophysics, went to grad school for nuclear physics, dropped out of my PhD when I got my master's, and started a career in mobile engineering. So that takes you to 2011, 2012. And then I spent 3-4 years doing software engineering full-time in the mobile space, mainly doing iOS engineering and working my way up the career ladder across startups and bigger companies. And in doing so, I did a bunch of open source work and presentations, conferences, etc. And in 2015, I had somewhat of a presence online in the iOS space, and individual by the name of Michael reached out to me in 2015 looking to get a job in iOS. Sends me an email, I review his resume, we go back and forth, he lands a job, we keep in touch, he pivots to crypto, starts a meetup in Tampa around crypto, does some Ethereum development, and then gets the idea for Pocket. So the CEO of Pocket was basically how I got into crypto to begin with in 2015. So around 2017 or so, he is starting to build the idea for Pocket, which is blockchain access in your phone, so in your pocket, which is where the name comes from. And kind of reaches out to me to see if I can help build out some initial mobile SDKs or software development kits or libraries to kind of help get the idea off the ground. So I help him and his co-founders with some basics, bootstrapping stuff to get iOS apps and iOS SDKs written, because I've done, like I said, a bunch of open source work in the iOS space. So we kind of aligned there. And then they pivoted to build what I described earlier in this call, the decentralized infrastructure setup. And we kept in touch around late 2021 as I started looking for work. I was kind of getting disenchanted with where I was at the time. He reached out to me about a week after I started looking without even knowing that I was looking for work and said, hey, I'm looking for someone to come in to help me manage my engineering team. At the time, I was leading engineering teams at Capital One in the mobile space. And I had spent a year or more at this point kind of like going down the same crypto rabbit hole everyone did since DeFi summer 2020. Mm-hmm. So I was already a year and change thinking about this, in my free time. And then he kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of do it full time. I come in, and last year we had a pretty crazy year, and I somehow found myself now second in command for the company. So basically we met on Twitter, and now I'm co-running the company with him. That's kind of the story.
Nice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for giving us some of that background. And now really getting into like more of like actually how the Pocket Network operates and works. Can you give us a little bit more insight into like how it works behind the scenes, or anything that you can kind of share with the audience that you think would be helpful to really grasp the idea of the network?
Sure. So we have a token. No surprise. The company was born during the ICO days. So we have a token, POKT, POKT. And the token is used as an incentive mechanism to pay for our service and to run nodes. So in an ideal world, and I say ideal because there's what we're shooting for and where we are today. So what we're shooting for is the following. Let's say you're an app developer. You buy our token on some exchange, or you buy a wrapped version of our token on an EVM or on a DEX somewhere on some EVM. And then you come and you stake said token in what we call an app stake, and in a process what we call stake for access, or stake for blockchain access. So you would say, how many requests or how many API requests or relays would you be doing per day? Let's say it's 10 million. You stake whatever amount of tokens that is to match your daily output. And then as requests go through, as you pay for those requests, as your API requests go through the network, you burn those tokens. On the other side of the equation, we have node runners, where they stake tokens in a proof of stake style mechanism, right, to kind of put skin in the game, and then to validate the API requests that are going through the network. By validate, I mean process them, kind of ferry them from the app to the full node and back again. And we have the gateway in the middle that kind of facilitates the app stakes and the node stakes. So whenever someone is paying for a request, it goes to our gateway. The gateway pseudo randomly chooses a node somewhere in the world based on where the request is coming from. So if you have a request coming from Southeast Asia, it'll probably go through our gateway in Singapore or Mumbai, and then it'll go to a node that's closely positioned to where you are to get the highest performance, the lowest latency, and so on. And then the node that processes the request makes a little bit of that token. He gets rewarded with that token, a little bit of inflation built in. So that is the ideal world. We are almost there. There are pieces that are in place and pieces that are not in place. So that whole piece about nodes being able to stake and to process requests and get rewarded for tokens exists. The gateway facilitating all of this exists. Self-staking, or kind of doing permissionless staking with your apps, does not exist yet due to a limitation of the protocol. So we have a fork of Tendermint from like 5 years ago that we basically built up, and we've stretched it beyond belief. So we have a new version of protocol coming out in about a year. But until then, the way things work is you come to us as an app, and let's say Aave is an example of an app that uses us. And you come to us and you say, hey, I want to use you across X amount of chains. I think Aave is among half a dozen chains, and they're using us across all those chains. Like, hey, we'll pay you X amount per month. We come to a deal. We take those tokens, like Pocket Network Incorporated, PNI, takes those tokens, and then we buy on an exchange through our market makers an equivalent amount of Pocket tokens for the dollars that you gave us. So sorry, the company gives us cash, we buy tokens, and then we stake those tokens on their behalf, because there's limitations to how many stakes that you can actually stake on the app side. In the future, there's going to be other players, not just us, other gateways allowing people to stake, apps to stake their tokens. And in the future, if you are so inclined, you can just avoid going through a gateway directly and stake it yourself, so you can avoid the gateway fees. But we don't foresee most people doing that, because there's a lift to getting all of this up. We assume a lot of folks, there's going to be two classes of folks who are going to do what they currently do, is the SaaS model. They give us cash, we buy tokens, we stake those tokens. And there's going to be people who are just going to come in with their own tokens and stake it with us, and we take a fee on top for operating the gateway. And we assume all the other gateways in our system are going to work. The last thing I'll say about this is the future version of our protocol, which will enable all this, which is a custom built protocol with a custom consensus mechanism, and existing P2P, and I forgot whatever the other aspects of the blockchain are. This will enable all this decentralization of the gateway, the ability to have more self-sovereign permissionless app stakes, will allow all of that to happen. But for the next year, Pocket Network Incorporated, that operates our gateway, which we call the portal, is the only real way to access our decentralized network. So we do have a choke point, if I'm being, obviously very transparent here, but the network itself is decentralized.
Sure. So it sounds like you guys are really pretty close to where you want to be, just
Yes.
In that final step is kind of decentralizing that nature, right, with that midway.
Correct.
Something I wanted to ask, Arthur. So as far as the node runners, right? You said it was between 3 and 4 figures of different people operating nodes on the network. How did you guys get those people? Can anybody become a node operator, or were these like people that invested in the ICO if you guys had one?
Sure. I don't recall if we had an ICO. I should know this, but it was before I was involved in the space, and then at this point, it doesn't really matter one way or the other.
Yeah.
So anyone can become a node runner. However, we are in a commodity market. What we sell are basically RPC access, what's called remote procedure call access, which is the way most blockchains communicate, but not the only way. And there's a lot of competitors that do the same thing that we do. So the thing that we do differently than everyone else is we are not a centralized player. So Infura and Alchemy and Chainstack and Gateway and a bunch of others, some of these are our friends, some people work with us. They all run a lot of their nodes themselves. What we've basically done is incentivized people to stand up their own infrastructure by giving them the ability to make income through a token, right? The token is this thing that drives this entire flywheel. So yes, anyone can come in and do it. Some folks have been here from day one. We've had node runners that appeared out of nowhere right around the time I joined and are now one of the top 3 players because they are ex-DevOps engineers for very big companies in this space who I'm sure you can guess who they are, and they just realize they know how to operate here, and they realize they can make a lot of money. But basically, the way the network is working now is there's a huge drive to bare metal services, basically renting your own rack space in data centers, setting up your own machines, and running nodes and infrastructure that way because your cost basis goes down. Your what's known as your capital expenditure goes down pretty dramatically, so that no matter what the price of the token is, you'll always be profitable. So anyone can do it, but I don't recommend everyone to do it because at this point it's an expert's game. So obviously we welcome any player, but I will tell you it's not going to be as easy, right? The incumbents have figured out part of the system, but new players, like I said, have come in and have put in a flag on the ground as well, saying they're important.
Cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown. I know you touched on it a bit, but in terms of how you guys differentiate yourself, or what is that like key differentiating aspect of Pocket Network? Can we elaborate a little bit for the audience here? Like what truly makes you guys different? I know you mentioned decentralization as one piece. Is there any additional aspects that make like Pocket Network truly what it is?
Sure. I can do it by example. Do you remember Thanksgiving of this past year? Infura, and again, they're our friends, right? They're co-opetition is what we call them. So they dropped a notice saying, or their privacy policy got updated saying they're going to be collecting private data and wallet addresses and geolocation, right? Mm-hmm. So let me tell you where I was at this moment. So at this point, I was in my mother-in-law's house, and we were about to sit down for Thanksgiving dinner in 4 hours. So that moment, I see my Twitter blow up. And I see Discord blow up, and we have a big community. We have a DAO and a foundation. We have tens of thousands of members, and the more vocal ones are like, "Hey, this seems like a great opportunity for Pocket to kind of like stick it to Infura." And we're like, "Well, they're our friends. We know who runs Infura. We know we know Joe Lubin from Consensus. Like, what do we want to do here? Do we want to take a dig or not?" And basically, this was basically my first month in the COO role. I'm like, "All right, I'm just gonna write a piece saying what we don't do," right? I'll be like, "Hey, in the news, we see that some websites are collecting this data, and on our end, we realize that we're not, right? We look through all our logs, and we're like, we do not collect any of this information. So some of this information may actually come in through the portal, but we just eject it immediately, right? So your IP address, we do not collect. Your email address, we don't collect for all this stuff. The requests that are coming in from the apps that are using us, we don't collect that information. All we collect is information about the request itself just to debug the request, but we cannot point it back to a specific place in the world to a specific wallet address. So we're privacy preserving. By the way, Dennis, your mic has feedback, just a heads up. So we're privacy preserving, which you cannot guarantee that our competitors are, and some of them have, like I said, have come out and said that they are not privacy preserving. We made sure to update our privacy policy after this happened to be explicit in what we collect and where, and you can go and check, and you can see a section halfway down in page 3, 4, or 5 or wherever that literally says we do not, what we collect for our what's it called? What we collect from requests coming in and what we don't and why. And it also copy pastes from a blog post I wrote. So you can just Google the blog post, or if you guys share links, I can send the link. You can share it in your notes for the podcast. The other thing that differentiates us is how many blockchains we support. So if you go to any of the names I've dropped in the past, they support maybe 8 to 15. We support, like I said, 43 today. It'll be 47 on Monday, and probably another 5 or 6 be a month from now. We're basically adding 1 or 2 a week at this point. This week just happened to be great, where we added 7 all at once. And so we give you access that others don't. Something that we've been, the types of clients that we've been going after, we have 3 main verticals of types of clients we're trying to chase down right now. One of the ones are our competitors, because we're cheaper than most everyone else right now. We only operate a gateway. We don't operate the nodes, while other competitors operate their own gateways and their own nodes. And they also have the marketing to go after B2C customers, so just rank file customers. But they also aren't incentivized to stand up gateways all over the world or set up nodes all over the world, because it's expensive for them, because they have to do it all in-house. So what they've done is we've undercut their prices because we are able to. And now they're coming to us and saying, hey, we want access to Phantom in Southeast Asia, or we want access to Polygon in Europe, or we want access to DeFi Kingdom subnet in Korea or whatever. We're like, okay, cool. We support all of that, and we have people incentivized to have that traffic come from everywhere. So just here's what we charge. Send us your traffic, and our gateway will automatically match your traffic to the part of the world. You don't have to specify. We'll just do all the magic for you. And now we're starting to capture traffic from our competitors. I think right now we capture I think as an example, Polygon-RPC.com is the main Polygon vendor for traffic, and at the moment we capture 10 to 20% of all Polygon traffic through our gateway, because we provide 8 or 9 endpoints to that website that Anchor hosts. We have our own stuff going on with all these blockchains as well, but this is just one example. I can keep going and going, but I'll let you ask more questions. I hope that this shows the differentiation here.
This is extremely helpful. And I mean, a lot of people talk about security and scalability issues within the blockchain space. Can you kind of talk about how Pocket Network can handle the security aspects that people are really worried about, and the scalability issues of the blockchain space?
I can talk about it briefly. I may not be the best person to talk about it, but what happens on our end is we have a gateway, and the gateway has quality of service checks. And the quality of service checks to make sure to check for things like, are you using the latest version of a given client, or latest couple of versions of a client? I think is the blockchain up to date or within a tolerance of a few blocks for what the blockchain, the protocol for that given chain says that you're supposed to be at. Then we have consensus mechanisms that are in place to kind of check to make sure transactions actually occur. We have multiple nodes that service any given sets of requests, and they go to consensus before our blockchain is written to. So there's security measures built in there. There's a bunch of other stuff in there. I wish I could speak to it a little more intelligently. This is just not my specific forte here. But regarding security and scalability, we don't see the security issue really here on our end, because we're basically just relaying requests from the app to a full node. Because the way we're structured is, you have an app, you have the gateway, you have a Pocket node, and then you have the full node, like the Ethereum node or Polygon or Phantom node, and then it goes right back up the stack. For the scalability, I mean, we've seen early on, to give you an idea of our growth, back when I started in January or so of 2022, we had about 200 million requests per day. And then at our peak in the last month or so, we've been servicing 1.4 to 1.5 billion requests per day. There was one day where, out of the blue, somewhere between us getting to where we are, where we saw something like 400 million Ethereum requests come through, and we were able to process it without issue. Actually, as a network, we're over provisioned. We have more servers than we actually need to process everything. But that's just part of the game that we play here. A lot of folks here set up their own infrastructure to be able to process requests, so we have more than we need. So yeah, we can definitely scale.
Nice.
Awesome. That's super important. And in terms of how does the actual Pocket Network technology benefit developers and its end users? Can you talk to that piece a bit more in terms of the end user? What's that experience feel like for your clients, your potential future clients, and things of that nature?
So for doing it right, you shouldn't feel any difference from using any of your other providers. So if you're using, a lot of developers when they come into this ecosystem, right, kind of matriculating from being an engineer in what we call Web 2, right? When they Google or they search Google for how to get into the space, usually Alchemy comes up, or a couple other dev school companies with dev schools come up, and they start using those endpoints. The idea is, as they matriculate and they realize that they learn more, that they need a better setup for their infrastructure, or their app is starting to blow up, but they're seeing slow connections or censored connections, things that we don't censor various regions, right? Like, I think as an example, MetaMask accidentally blocked, or Infura accidentally blocked Venezuela for a couple of days, right? We don't do anything like that. So if they come across those problems, people then naturally find us, and they use us because they get basically this same speed or faster in most regards, performance. And we also provide the fault tolerance. Like, we just don't go down. If we go down, we have a whole backup network that gets spun up to process our requests. So we have very near perfect uptime over the last 2 years. I think we've only had a little bit of downtime somewhere early on, but beyond that, it's been nearly perfect because we have fail safes built in. So basically, the experience should be flawless, depending on what your specific expectations are. Again, keep in mind, we are decentralized. We do not control our node runners, but we do have quality checks that are in place. I will tell you now that our quality checks are pretty good, but in about a month or 3 weeks from now, we will have phenomenal quality checks. So we've basically rebuilt our entire system from scratch over the last 6 months, and we're just about getting ready to launch it.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's been a good time to, rebuild a system, just
build market.
Right. 100%.
It sounds like you guys are over-engineered for reliability, just like that's the approach and the vibe we get.
Yeah. So we have this thing that we call how they have trilemmas in this. So we have what we call the RPC trilemma, as our head of protocol named it that because we deal with RPCs. We actually just published a blog post about it. If I remember, I'll send you the link. We published it last night on Thursday. We're recording this on Friday for anyone who's listening. So RPC stands for, it stands for remote procedure call, but the RPC trilemma, it's reliability, performance, and cost. And I think the way he has set up, it said cost is something that cost of information went down in Web 1. Cost of performance went down performance went up in Web 2 of the internet, right? Everything got scaled, things moved to the cloud. And the reliability of data and integrity of data is something that Web 3 solves. So when you say we're over-engineered for reliability, that's what we're trying to do anyway. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head without me having to say it. So thanks for the opening.
In terms of like challenges, every organization has their own challenges. What challenge do you see Pocket Network facing over the next couple of years, and overall maybe the blockchain industry coming into the next couple of years, where a lot of sifting is happening, a lot of cleaning up, a lot of building? I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts and opinion there.
Well, so I'll give you some dirty laundry first, and then I'll kind of, people like honesty, right? So as I mentioned in the very beginning, I personally come from Web 2, and I come from a place where I was just, went from being an engineer to managing larger and larger teams. And when I came here, we basically had a scrappy team, like very hardworking individuals, and they knew what they were building, but they were also a little more Web 3 native than a lot of the folks that came in last year, myself included. So basically, one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of folks coming into the space, they're bringing a lot of baggage from how software is built from the Web 2 world, not realizing that now open source work you can get money back from that, or have the community build for you, because DAOs tend to have treasuries, and the treasuries don't actually have benefactors. Their treasuries come from protocols themselves. So as an example, the way our DAO gets money is 10% of all the rewards that come from relays go to the DAO's treasury. So the DAO has an 8 or 9 figure treasury right now, which we now are using to pay open source contributors. So one thing you have to learn about is like Web3 native contributors or Web 2 individuals who want to contribute to a Web3 project can just come in and get paid to do it in a native token. So last year, going back to how the team operated, so I hired a bunch of folks to kind of build out a software engineering team. And as we built it out, I might have overhired a little bit because we were trying to do too many different things at once, because that's how I understood it. As I learned our business over the course of the year, and as my colleagues did as well, we had to pare back. Unfortunately, we had to lay off some folks, but we were able to get the right group of people now to build what we're trying to build, right? Which is this future with the multiple gateways, and with our specific gateway, add a bunch of value add features. So what I foresee a lot of companies going through is converting people who are Web 2 to Web 3, because you bring a lot of your own baggage with you. You assume things, those things may not be right or wrong. And then you may have to course correct. So in our example, we hired to build out a lot of projects, because at that time we didn't really have we have a DAO, a foundation, and we have Pocket Network Incorporated, the corporate entity for which I work for specifically. We didn't really have a good separation between PNF, the foundation, and PNI, the incorporation. And we were building everything for everyone all at once. And then that was kind of burning up our runway. And we realized we overhired for that. And then we had to adjust in the marketing, the sales, and the engineering side a little bit to course correct. And now we're like executing very efficiently, much leaner, and getting things done, because we have realized, not only did the CEO, who's Web3 native, and a couple other folks who were here early on realize that, but also all the new employees basically had a real life experience in operating in Web3 and learned how to operate properly in this space. So it's the onboarding experience for employees is hard. I would say the other thing that needs to be fixed around the board is just user experience, the general UX. UX is horrific in this space. We had like an all hands the other day, and I wish I could have found this graphic, but there's this graphic I saw online that basically takes the adoption of the internet from 1990 to present day, and on top of it overlays the adoption curve for crypto and Web3 from Bitcoin to where we are now, and basically says where we are now is where we were when the internet was around in 1998. Which is, I was around, that's around the time I started using the internet. I was 12 years old in 98, so I was born in 86. And I just realized that, like, oh my God, this is like completely the wild, wild west. I've known it's been like, but to actually someone to say out loud what I felt in my heart, that we are so early on, has been reaffirming that we're just early, right? Like, for those of us who are at ETH Denver, we saw that the main topics, at least that I recall seeing, are like better UX and cross-chain work, right? Those are the two like major themes that I personally witnessed. I'm sure there was others. Pocket Network specifically is set up for cross-chain work, right? We work across multiple chains. There is a future in which we could enable cross-chain bridging and add an experience there if we really want to. We're just not there yet. That is a value-add feature for the future. But in general, I think for this space, it's getting people to think in the Web3 mentality, which is you're basically a private entity, but building in public. So you're going to have detractors and supporters, like you do at a public company. You're basically, every time you say or do anything, you're in front of a you're basically doing a town hall with all your biggest shareholders, because we're an ownership economy. So learning to deal with that and learning to not get frustrated and just understand that everyone here wants you to succeed. Some personalities are just a little more negative than others. You just have to kind of adapt to that, and it's not for everyone, right? People do get mentally affected by this. I would say that right there probably is the biggest thing, is just learning how to operate, work for a public, understand that you're in the beginning of an industry. You are working for a small company, but the small company is operating as if it's a publicly traded entity, and you are a figurehead, even if you don't want to be a figurehead, and that's just life, and you gotta just toughen up.
Very true. You were talking about the difficulty of onboarding employees, and bringing them out of that Web 2 mentality, getting them in that Web 3 mentality in the workforce, and the difficulty of onboarding the actual users, right? Like the UI, the UX. Really, I think personally, it sounds like you agree. That's going to be the next major milestone for crypto, is when onboarding on both the employees and the consumer sides is actually user friendly, and is natural, right? Because it's a very steep learning curve, and it's not easy to get started.
No, not at all. I mean, we were joking about it. So I was teaching, just to give you one more example, if we have a moment, I was teaching our employees, because we have a lot of folks reaching their 1 year mark and they're vesting tokens, and I was teaching them how to stake it and how to sell it and all that. And then I was talking to them about what my wife and I do. My wife is very non-technical. She's a doctor. She's just like, whenever I talk about what I do for a living, she's like, I promise I'm listening, and then she falls asleep. And I love her to pieces, but it's just fun, I just have to share that. So whenever I leave on a business trip, like when I went to Denver, we go over, like, God forbid the plane crashes or something happens, like, what do you do? Like, what's the continuity? So when it comes to the section of information that I've jotted down in a secure location around crypto, it basically says, call my boss or call this friend, because I can't, no matter how many times I've tried to teach this to you, I can't. So yeah, we have to get beyond that. And to be fair, I'm trying to live by the crypto ethos. I have a ledger here, like right next to me. with my Bitcoin full node running on an external hard drive, and I'm like, this is fun, but this is like geeky fun for me, right? This is me getting connected, but nowhere in my life do I expect anyone else in my circle to ever do this, right? I think the next future is going to come from software like things like iOS and Android or whatever, Solana phone or whatever it is that kind of breaks through, is able to do secure recovery, social recovery, and secure storage of private keys on like what they call the secure enclave on iOS, like the secure chips, right? Like that is the future I think we're going to have to get towards. Obviously, it goes against the ethos of self-sovereignty, but honestly, it's not for everyone, right? People moved away from putting money under mattresses because it just didn't make sense long term. And so people are not going to be putting, their money on ledgers and stocking them away in, security boxes, not the vast majority of people. So that's where we got to improve, is that experience.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
100%.
and as we're slowly wrapping up the podcast, I want to kind of bring in the shining light in that aspect of like any success stories, things that you guys are super proud of recently that you've been able to accomplish, and kind of just tell the audience, like, this is your moment to shine. I know you work really hard. We had a lot of conversations at Denver, and just speak it.
Yeah. So I'll call on one, right? We have a lot, but one that I think is pretty cool is DeFi Kingdoms. It's a game that exists on 3 blockchains. So back in when Pocket got its first big win, meaning when it started to hit, like, I think over 100 million relays a day, it was when we launched DeFi Kingdoms in late 2021. So around the time I started exploring joining the company. And so at the time it was a game, like the original base game launched on Harmony blockchain. And unfortunately last year, Harmony had an exploit on their bridge. So I think they've kind of been winding down. I'm not really following on them anymore, but DeFi Kingdoms, as an example, we were a launch partner for them. We provided them a lot of their initial RPC or blockchain access. And then when they migrated, when they created an expansion, I think they called the expansion Crystal Veil, DeFi Kingdoms Crystal Veil, they decided to launch that on an Avalanche subnet. And so they have what's known as the DFK or DeFi Kingdoms subnet. So we were a launch partner with them as well because they liked us so much. And then they decided, when I think Harmony basically blew up, they decided to move DeFi Kingdoms to Clayton, which is a Korean subnet, I think built by POKT. I think that platform, and I think it's supposedly going to be gaming focused. Again, don't quote me on that. They decided to move to Clayton, and because of that, we became a launch partner for them and for Clayton at the same time.
Nice.
So yeah, we have a case study coming out in the next month or so around all of this. But we basically have been working hand in hand with DeFi Kingdoms to launch them on every version of their game on every single blockchain. And for us, games are a huge provider of RPC access, right? Because games do a lot of relays or a lot of API requests back and forth to the blockchain, and that's how our node runners get paid and stay incentivized. So as I said, we have 3 major customers that we're going after. One was other gateways who we can undercut and provide more regional accessibility and more chains. The other one is the second one is games, because they provide so many calls. The third one is actually wallets. So one of the goals for us to go to ETH Denver and to sponsor an event right before ETH Denver called WalletCon was basically to work with as many wallets as possible, because wallets are basically free tools where there is no way for them to make money. What we can do is basically offer MEV protection by doing MEV ourselves at our layer and then providing the vast majority of that money back to the wallet. The wallet can then provide it back to the end user, or the wallet can keep it for themselves as a profit. So basically treating MEV like we do ads in Web 2, where the customer is the product because the product they're using is free. So that's kind of how we think about MEV. So basically, yeah, this is my way of saying gaming is a great DFK, DeFi Kingdoms is a great win success story. We're also working with Aave, as I said earlier on. We have quite a few product companies that we're working with. But our big bet right now are also games and wallets. And with respect to wallets, we recently just found out actually Trust Wallet was using us, and we're working with a bunch of other wallets as well to kind of get integrated. So
nice.
Yeah, there's my win and my plug at the same time.
That's incredible. And I mean, I'm excited to see where Pocket Network goes. And lastly, just any insight on any roadmaps, projects,
Sure.
things that your community should be excited for, things that you're working very hard on, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So we are moving to a point right now where, as I mentioned very early on, we are going to decentralize our gateway. Right now, we have a monopoly over our network, but to realize the vision in our white paper, there should be multiple gateways available. Even though the gateways are going to be hard to stand up, we envision to have some competition within our own ecosystem, which is expected. So we're starting to build up our own value proposition. So in a month or so, we're going to be launching not only enhanced quality of service, as I mentioned, we're also going to be testing out an indexing play. So we're going to be working with Covalent as a value add service to our service. We are adding the ability to sign in with Ethereum or an EVM, and also the ability to pay with stablecoins for service rather than have to use cash. So what that does is allows us to have folks like folks from Olympus DAO, as an example. I talked to them, and they're like, they wouldn't tell me who they were or let me take a picture, but basically said, we would love to use you, but we don't want to log in. We don't want to dox anyone on our end, and we don't want to have to pay with a credit card. So we would love to just pay with stablecoins with an address. So we basically just, I think, inked a deal with Diagonal, or about to ink a deal with them to do stablecoin payments in our portal soon. And beyond that, we're going to try to build out our own community as well, like our developer community. Right now, we've been focusing a lot on, like I said, games, wallets, bigger partnerships, and other gateways. But to win at the end of the day, you also have to get to the customers. So seeing that we're going to be seeding our monopoly soon, we're preparing for that world. And we have a brand new marketing team in place to kind of handle that for us.
Awesome. Very cool, Arthur. Yeah, sounds like some super exciting things going on in Pocket. You know, it sounds like you guys have really done a lot and been seeing some of those successes, especially within this last year. You know, it's been a great year to build. And it's cool seeing people in the space that are really, really keeping their heads down and, you know, building.
Yeah, I will tell you this. One of the questions that I get asked in interviews, not these interviews, but job interviews in the past, is like, tell me about a time where you had to overcome like some kind of hardship. I have stories for years right now because of the last like 9 months of my life. Right. So yeah, I love building in the space. I feel like I have like 10x myself as an individual, as a manager, as a leader. I feel like my skill sets are growing. Like I love the space. I love what we do. Obviously, I'm sure you can tell with my voice here. But yeah, super excited for what's coming on our end. I think next quarter is going to be massive for us, and I think by the end of the year we'll be really solidly placed. Hopefully, coming out of the bear market. Praying we're coming out of it by then. But yeah, but more so than ever, I mean, enjoy the opportunities to do interviews like this and kind of get to talk about what we do. I think my message gets better and better the longer and longer I'm in this space. So to date, this is my best interview.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Arthur. It's awesome to have you on. We're going to go ahead and leave all of Arthur's links, some info about the Pocket Network in the description of this video. So if you guys are interested, make sure to check that out. And make sure you guys are liking, comment any thoughts on the videos, any guests you would like to see in the next episodes. And this has been the CoinScan team bringing you Crypto Current.